action-packed Hogan's Alley and
nuts for Nintendo.
Who are the Mario brothers?
I don't know.
Excito Bike Tojo.
Oh, you're playing with power.
It's the video game years, and prepare for 1985. The systems, the culture, the games. King Arthur battles the undead.
He's just running around in his boxer shorts, which is pretty hilarious.
Nintendo releases an entertainment system.
They didn't market it as a video game console. They marketed it as something entirely different.
And the Vic Viper shoots up arcades.
Shoot the core!
Plus a global thief on the loose, and Mario goes super. So strap on your jetpack and don't shoot the food. Get ready for 1985.
So Commando was released by Capcom in the arcades.
Commando was originally released in Japan as Senjou no Okami, Wolf of the Battlefield.
So you played the character Super Joe. Essentially, at the beginning of the game, you got dropped off in the jungle by a helicopter, and now you got to battle your way through enemies single-handedly to make it to the end.
You have a machine gun, you can shoot in all directions, and you have grenades.
Commando is relentless because everybody comes and they kill you before you even have a chance to react. There's too many guys to kill.
You can rescue hostages along the way. You can throw grenades into bunkers.
It had a fantastic port on the Commodore 64, which had some of the most memorable Commodore 64 music ever.
Commando's important because it did kind of create a genre with its development, the over-the-top run-and-gun shooter. It was really kind of the first to popularize the gameplay, and you're going to see a lot more of these types of games come out.
Ultima 4 Quest of the Avatar is a sequel to Ultima 3.
Very good, Pat. Do we have anything more to add to that? No?
So Ultima 3 kind of set the standard of what it was kind of the birth of the modern role-playing video game.
Lord British, Richard Garriott, is back with Ultima 4 Quest of the Avatar.
Instead of grinding constantly through dungeons, there is no real overall evil that you have to fight in Ultima 4. The goal of it is to become the Avatar.
If you do good deeds in the game, you do well to improve your character. If you do bad stuff in the game, it takes away your virtues. It's a really interesting game mechanic, actually.
Like, if you're actually too violent, or if you kill certain characters, you can't get certain virtues, or it becomes that much harder to get it. So playing it like a traditional RPG would actually make it harder.
The game was basically Richard Garriott's response to hate mail from parents saying that his past games had been immoral.
It must have been fairly frustrating for people who had no idea what they were getting into when they started to play it.
Among the hate mail Richard Garriott had received, there was some from an organization called BAD, Bothered About Dungeons and Dragons. I told you it was the game of the devil.
It was a much more expansive, bigger world than in Ultima 3, but it also tweaked certain things. You know, there was a system where you answered questions early on, and that, set your stats and what kind of person you were going to be.
Games that are quietly inspiring the Japanese companies making cutesy shooters and other things to make the games that will truly define a generation of RPG players.
I've read that it's one of Richard Garriott's favorite games, and hey, if you can't trust the guy who made the damn thing, what are you going to do?
Data East put out Ring King.
The thing that always jumped out at me about Ring King is the kind of comic-y nature.
Sort of continues on with that idea of having kind of all these comical boxers in the game.
You can actually go around the ring, forward and backwards, and you actually can rotate around your opponent.
The big feature of the game was the goofy special attacks that you could initiate from a specific distance and with specific timing, and it could actually result in an instant KO.
It's not like a simulator or anything like that. It's just a fun game where you beat the crap out of someone.
That it's kind of actually a fast punching game. Like, you could really, go at it with the characters. And I always liked that game, and especially on the NES, it was actually really fun.
Fun decimation of your foe.
Will you be the one to witness the birth of the incredible Nintendo Entertainment System? The one to play with Rob, the extraordinary video robot, batteries not included. He helps you tackle even the toughest challenge. Will you be the first to raise the incredibly accurate Zapper and play games like Duck Hunt or action-packed Hogan's Alley and high-flying Kung Fu, each sold separately? Will you be the one to experience the Nintendo Entertainment System? Comes with Rob, Zapper, Control Deck, 2 controllers, Gyromite, and Duck Hunt.
The Nintendo Entertainment System.
I never heard of it.
What is it?
So the Famicom, which is the Japanese version of the NES, came out in 1983. It sold great in Japan because Japan did not have the same crash that we did.
So Nintendo thought, hey, I want to release this in America. The only problem was the video game crash of 83, 84 knocked out the home console video game market almost entirely.
You had a whole lot of people who got very badly burned, you know, buyers from retail stores, and they didn't want to take a chance on video games. And Nintendo really had to roll the dice. Like, they had to actually, they test marketed it in New York, and they had to go to these guys and say, we will assume all the risk.
Nintendo had to basically say, whatever you don't sell stores, we'll buy back.
When we launched in New York area in late fall of '85, it was really fun. A ton of work because we were importing all of this new product, which we had to distribute all over New York and New Jersey area.
They would go around to department stores, to malls, to FAO Schwarz stores, and they would personally, these employees, set up these displays and demonstration units and actively try to demonstrate and sell the system to people just walking by. Here, try this game console out. Try this system out.
Originally, Nintendo of America wanted to do a smaller market, but the Japan head at the time said, no, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it in freaking New York City, one of the biggest markets in the United States.
So in trying to sell it to Americans, they had to think of a new way to market it in the sense that, you know, hey consumers, this is not a video game, this is something different.
Test marketing the NES was a big task, and the reason being is there was such disparate views on video games. I mean, the kids always loved video games.
At the time, video games were bad words. You did not want to be affiliated with anything to do with video games. So Nintendo had to market themselves carefully so they weren't thrown in with that bunch. So they didn't call it a video game, they called it a Nintendo Entertainment System.
It's much more than just a video game console. Look, it's got a robot.
Rob was used to market the NES as something more sophisticated than just a video game. It's like a toy, and it's like a robot, and it's from the future.
So Nintendo said, look guys, this isn't a video game system. It's a toy. It's got a gun. It's got a robot. This is a toy, guys. This is awesome. And as silly as that sounds, it worked.
As cool as Rob looked, it only supported 2 games, Gyromite and Stack Up.
So you're Professor Hector in Gyromite, and you have lots of dynamite that's going to go off in a lot of time. That's good for kids. And you have to get to the dynamite beforehand. And these little lizard guys named Smicks that come after you to try to kill you.
And he had these platforms that would go on each side, these little attachments. So there would be a gyro spinner, and then the gyro, and it would sit on top of these things that would activate the buttons, which would open gates in Gyromite.
Really ingenious and cool because it helped market Nintendo as an entertainment system and a toy versus a video game. But the problem was setting up and using this guy was not easy at all.
No. I always enjoyed playing it just with the controllers because it's a lot faster. Like, I would have the 2 controllers in my hands because if you have to wait for Rob's like,
Poor guy. He was an amusing novelty that got the system on the store shelves, but as soon as people got tastes of games that didn't require the tedious setup of a robotic operating buddy, he was relegated to closets where he gathered dust.
But luckily we had this arsenal of 16 games, of which probably 10 or more of them were really good games. And then on top of that we had Rob the robot and the Zapper the light gun, and those 2 things made it seem like the technology was really different and new. So it was actually a slam dunk to sell it.
This is a Zapper. Light gun came with the NES, and you play Duck Hunt with this. And Duck Hunt, while coming off as a simple tech demo, is a lot of fun.
A pretty fascinating piece of technology when you think about it. It basically times out these flashes on the screen.
And if you miss them, there is the one thing that everyone remembers about Duck Hunt, which is the dog.
That dog. That smug little look on his face when those ducks fly away and he pops up and he laughs at you.
The dog is cruel and he mocks you, and you cannot have your revenge on the dog. You just have to endure.
Duck Hunt had 3 modes: 1 duck, 2 ducks, and clay pigeons, which I actually thought were clouds when I was a kid.
Now you can also control the duck using the second controller.
Correct.
And that was like the first kind of like cooperative competitive gaming, because like you're both playing together, but like one's trying to survive, the other one's shooting at him. But the duck would always lose because you press the gun against the screen and just fire.
Nintendo Zapper? Pew, pew, pew. Who wouldn't want to play that?
This would become the base sort of model for every video game controller afterwards. They all would incorporate at least 2 buttons, a start button, and a control pad. Everyone afterwards.
I mean, just the way they infiltrated the culture so soon afterwards was that you weren't playing video games, you were playing Nintendo. It was like Kleenex or Q-tips. You know, the brand was the product.
The technology had progressed enough that the characters were more decipherable as people or animals.
Graphic superiority of the system was like, nothing we had before. It was an 8-bit system, and there were 8-bit systems before, but nothing looked like the Nintendo.
The games were marketed by actually how they looked and how they were. And Nintendo was very careful in doing this. If you go back to the Atari era, to the Intellivision era, you look at the box art of all these games, it doesn't show what the actual game is. It shows these painted, abstract drawings, and that's not what the game is.
Nintendo came up with this brilliant idea. Let's make it so only cartridges made by Nintendo can be played in the machine.
The Atari kind of showed what could happen if they weren't really careful about how they controlled the system. So Nintendo had a strict product approval policy, and they would only allow a certain number of games per developer per year.
Once it was released nationwide in '86, you're about 3 years removed from the video game crash. So it's almost a new semi-generation of kids that maybe they never had an Atari. They were just too young for that, like I was. But now you see something called the NES, and all of a sudden, this is new again. All of a sudden, home console video games are now kickstarted again.
And Nintendo, in accomplishing the impossible, basically proved, and this is very important, that video games were not dead.
And all we did was just confirm what we thought, which is that the kids were going to continue to love them because they were great games, and the parents would see it as something radically new and be willing to maybe put it under the Christmas tree.
And now, it should have been a video game in 1985.
Oh, hello, I'm Eric, and here's the stuff from 1985 that should have been made into a video game, but was not. In movies, Rocky IV for the NES, trained in the harsh Russian wilderness to take on your rival Drago in this montage of minigames. Jump rope but with careful timing, do hanging sit-ups and try not to get a hernia, lift a cart like an ox and climb a mountain. Now you're ready. Drago! The Breakfast Club for the NES, sneak out of Saturday morning detention in this angsty stealth game, but don't get caught by the evil principal or he'll send you back to detention with your complaining classmates and their feelings. Shout by Tears for Fears for the NES. Kids, you can finally take all your pent-up energy and let it all out without getting yelled at by your parents in this game where you can just yell as loud as you want, but only in the game. Shut up. Back to the Future for the NES. In this zany take on Back to the Future, get this, you'd run through the streets throwing bowling balls at your enemies, which would be girls with hula hoops and guys walking back and forth with a pane of glass, inexplicably, and bees. For no reason, bees. That'd be so crazy, they would never do that. Or would they? And that's what should have been a video game in 1985. And I want to play